With Kingdom Hearts 3 nearing release, I recently decided to check out a story summary video by Suggestive Gaming which covers the entire series up to this point. Even though I've personally completed nearly every game in the series, excluding the mobile version of which I'm drastically behind, I figured a story refresher would help with any plot points I may have forgotten. The summary video covers the events of the series in chronological order, so the first 5 minutes are focused on some of the darkest aspects of the Kingdom Hearts lore, including the Keyblade War, the end of the world, the manipulation of the 3 heroes in Birth by Sleep, all delivered with an appropriately serious line reading by the narrator. It was then about 5 minutes into the summary where I'm treated to the following exchange.
However, Aqua, aided by another Keyblade apprentice, Mickey Mouse.
That's when I had to pause the video to spend the next half hour laughing to the point of tears. I knew it was coming too. Like I said, I've been playing these games ever since the first Kingdom Hearts launched in 2002, but even after 17 years, I still haven't gotten fully used to the way the series bounces between cutscenes involving dark-robed anime figures, Lovecraftian monstrosities, and characters succumbing to existential tragedy straight out of a Black Mirror episode, only to immediately follow all that up with an appearance by Mickey, Goofy, or Donald. That pretty much sums up Kingdom Hearts in a nutshell. And that's why I love it. As a series, Kingdom Hearts has one of the greatest storylines in the history of video games. No, I'm not joking. Sure, there have been plenty of memes, parody videos, and other forms of satire over the years, and I'm not even going to refute any of it, except for the meme about Sora being everyone. That one's just not true. This guy, on the other hand. Look, I never said it was a well-written story, just a highly entertaining one, and I feel like that doesn't get enough appreciation nowadays. Sure, it's fine to have high standards, especially in a medium that allows for infinite possibilities with meta-narratives tied into gameplay, but still, games like Kingdom Hearts, Resident Evil, or Devil May Cry aren't trying to break new narrative ground. Their primary goal has always been to keep players entertained, and in the world of video games, I do feel that's the most important thing to focus on. That doesn't mean you shouldn't strive for better writing. Heck, the last couple of years have raised the bar considerably in that respect, but it also means that it's okay to be invested in the story and characters of games that aren't trying to become the next War and Peace. To take a page from The Onion,
you can either choose to enjoy for the perfectly fine piece of entertainment it is, or live out the rest of your existence as a miserable killjoy who slogs through life, recoiling at anything remotely joyful or upbeat in the world. Your choice.
Regardless, I've still seen a lot of ongoing resentment towards the Kingdom Hearts series over the years, as if its mere existence was some kind of unforgivable offense. Even after 17 years of sequels and spin-offs, the sheer hatred some people have exhibited towards the series hasn't waned at all, and I rarely ever see anyone make any counter-arguments in its defense. Seriously, I've seen more people go to bat for David Cage games than I do for Kingdom Hearts. And as a longtime fan who is eagerly awaiting Kingdom Hearts 3, and also Resident Evil 2 Remake, man, talk about coming into the new year swinging. I felt that my next video should be dedicated to discussing the more underappreciated aspects of the series. One of the more dismissive complaints I've seen from critics is that the games are just glorified fan fiction that combines Disney, Final Fantasy, and about 100 other anime tropes. I mean,
that's the point!
Way to state the obvious there. What do you think the main appeal of any multi-franchise crossover is supposed to be? Narrative complaints aside, the crossover aspect of Disney and Square-owned properties into one video game franchise represents the very heart of Kingdom Hearts. Every new character reveal is meant to evoke a feeling of excitement and nostalgia for fans from both sides of the franchise fence. As a Disney fan alone, just try and tell me that you didn't mark out the first time they introduced some of the most famous villains gathered together in one spot.
It's the two heavenly kings, unless there's a third one! Let's go for 4!
That'll settle things.
Oh my
Yeah!
At the risk of undermining my previous statement, the actual story over how Kingdom Hearts even came into existence is far more interesting than the games themselves. The chance meeting between a Square and Disney employee sharing an elevator ride together, and the brief small talk that led to an actual partnership is like one of those paradoxical stories where all the stars in the universe aligned at just the right time in order to let this one-in-a-million encounter take place. And even compared to the massive crossovers of today, I'm still amazed that Kingdom Hearts is a thing that even exists. No matter how many times I see Donald or Goofy having a conversation with a Final Fantasy character, I'm still left with the same feelings of joy and confusion I felt 17 years ago. It's such a fantastically bizarre mashup that if you brought it up online or at school prior to its existence, you'd probably get laughed right out of your chosen social circle. And yet, Against all conceivable odds, the series exists. Something I'm sure Square is eternally grateful for, considering it's also become one of their biggest successes. But let's say you're one of those purists who find the double injection of Final Fantasy and anime OCs to be somehow disrespectful to Disney's classic films. On the contrary, Kingdom Hearts has paid more loving homage to these Disney properties than Disney themselves have done in years. When was the last time you ever saw Disney do anything with Hercules? How about the fact that they even acknowledged The Hunchback of Notre Dame, one of Disney's biggest regrets? Or how Big Hero 6's world is a direct sequel to the original film, something that still hasn't been greenlit. Heck, at one point they even considered a Black Cauldron world. And Disney hates that movie! Granted, it is true that a lot of the Disney worlds tend to just be abridged retellings of their respective films. Stripping away the character development and pacing of the movies does hurt many of the in-game adaptations, especially in the case of Aladdin and Hunchback. But the core appeal is still intact, which is to allow fans to experience each film's most famous set pieces and fight alongside their favorite characters, who in turn have been given a high-quality facelift courtesy of the fantastic art direction put towards each game. Plus, it sounds like Kingdom Hearts 3 is finally eliminating this problem, as most of the new worlds will feature their own original scenarios instead of just retelling their original storylines. Speaking of which, the Final Fantasy side of the crossover is actually more inventive, featuring brand new stories and scenarios for its characters, while still staying true to their core personalities and motivations. Many of them also feature brand new designs that have been tailored for the Kingdom Hearts setting. This includes an older Squall who more closely resembles his father, Cypher and his crew as young delinquents, the YRP trio as fairies. These are all interesting takes of classic FF characters, as well as the fact that they all come from the same world of Hollow Bastion, which was destroyed by the Heartless prior to the events of the first game. But out of all the alternative FF takes, the most interesting by far has to be Cloud's. In another famous fanboy-fueled moment in the series, seeing Cloud slowly strut into view for the first time, dressed in Vincent's clothing while working as a hired assassin to take out Hercules, was undoubtedly one of the coolest moments in the entire series. Miss you guys. And as a big Final Fantasy VII fan, I became legitimately intrigued by the new storyline involving Cloud and Sephiroth, where the latter makes vague allusions that they were once the same person but split into two beings, a concept the series already has in spades. And of course, I was especially happy when Tifa made her debut in the sequel, which was actually kept secret during the Japanese release, even leaving her out of the official strategy guide. Nomura knew about the strong fan demand and decided to keep it as a surprise up to the very last moment. I can only hope he's also repeating history with Kingdom Hearts 3, since as of this recording, we haven't seen hide nor hair of the FF crew in any of the trailers. The only mention was a somewhat dismissive statement about the demand to add in another Sephiroth boss battle, as if it were an afterthought instead of a highly anticipated tradition. I'm pretty sure he's trolling a bit, but it does make me want to next talk about the growing counter-argument that Kingdom Hearts doesn't necessarily need the Final Fantasy representation anymore. Just like with Disney's films, Kingdom Hearts doesn't just cater to the most popular Final Fantasy franchises. Sure, we see the FF7 crew pretty much everywhere nowadays, but how often do Selphie, Wakka, or Setzer get acknowledgement? Heck, there were even plans at one point to include Parasite Eve's Aya Brea. Being able to see these less popular characters rendered with modern graphics and voiceovers is a rare treat, which is why I would be personally disappointed if they chose to do away with the Final Fantasy side of the crossover entirely. But when you come down to it, it isn't Final Fantasy or Disney that defines the Kingdom Hearts series, but the original characters, settings, and storylines that were created exclusively for this crossover. While Sora might be the archetypical young kid that gets thrown into a fantasy world and is then chosen by the magical MacGuffin to save it, a concept that has especially grown stale in modern anime courtesy of the isekai genre, he's also one of my all-time favorite Square characters. Simply put, he's just a goofy kid who gets excited over every new world he comes across, always rushing towards the next adventure without a moment's hesitation, but still willing to sacrifice everything he has to help the people he cares about. Plus, there's the satisfaction players experience with using Sora to take out the biggest Disney threats, as well as some of Final Fantasy's strongest characters, sometimes in a group. In the end, Sora represents the power fantasy we've all had at one point in our lives, hanging out with our favorite heroes, Disney or otherwise. He's not the most original or deepest character by any means, but dang it, I still love him all the same. For a character that does have more depth to him, we need to look at Sora's best friend / occasional rival, Riku, whose story of betrayal and redemption takes some interesting turns throughout the series. Rather than suppress the darkness within him, a common goal nearly every character in the series strives for, Riku instead allows himself to fall deeper, eventually mastering the darkness within him. I feel like too many redemption storylines tend to have their characters reject whatever evil power possessed them, leading to a purification of sorts of both mind and or body. Instead, Riku learns to utilize the dark power within him, while also maintaining a pure enough heart that lets him become a Keyblade Master, even before Sora. To add to that, it also makes him the biggest threat among the villains, since they can no longer use their own powers of darkness to manipulate him. As for Kairi, I really hope she finally gets to be in the spotlight again. Once the sole driving force for Sora and Riku in the original game, Kairi was quickly tossed into the background after 2 games while Sora and Riku continued on with their adventures. She was recently built up to have a more active role courtesy of her Keyblade training, but at this point late in the series, it would be like taking lessons on King Kai's planet, while her 2 buddies have already gone on to master Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan. It's become too common a trope, particularly in Japanese media, to have the heroine make a strong debut, only to be immediately incapacitated by a stronger opponent that only the main, and often male, hero can overcome. Nomura himself has been found guilty of this, so I really hope Kairi doesn't get built up as a Keyblade warrior only to turn into a damsel in distress immediately after. It would also be nice if the series remembered that Sora and Kairi had romantic feelings for one another. Continuing the topic of original characters, I would be remiss not to mention Organization 13, one of my all-time favorite villain groups in any medium. As character designs go, I've always loved the symmetry of villains wearing matching uniforms, yet still possessing vastly different personalities and powers to differentiate them. It's kind of a meta commentary on how an outwardly organized group is, in reality, disorganized, but metaphors aside, it just looks really cool. In fact, it could be argued that the black hoods and robes that make up the organization's attire have become more iconic than any of the members themselves. I'm sure most of you that started the series with the first game way back in 2002 found themselves utterly baffled by that game's secret movie. After finishing the adventure with this ingrained understanding of how the different franchises all fit together, here was this insane Matrix-looking teaser showcasing a futuristic city with older-looking characters and scarier-looking Heartless. It would be like if the first season of Dragon Ball ended with a teaser of Super Saiyan Goku vs. Frieza. Jeez, that's 2 Dragon Ball references in one video. Can you tell I'm excited for the Broly movie? But what I especially love about the full cowl designs of the robes is that it leads to some of the most interesting mysteries and reveals in the Kingdom Hearts series, if not video games in general. Discerning body shapes aside, not to mention a particular character's ears, it really could be anyone hiding beneath those hoods, and I found myself always speculating over each new mystery figure followed by legitimate surprise over their eventual reveal. Case in point, the bait and switch with Ansem's return in Kingdom Hearts 2 is one of my all-time favorite twists ever in a video game. First, there was the initial surprise of seeing him alive and well in the beginning of the game, followed by glimpses of what is assumed to be Riku running around in the same outfit. Cut to the game's 3rd act in which Kairi is reunited with Riku and... oh yeah, that got me good. Like I said, it's a simple but effective design that always leaves you guessing, and almost always leads to some genuinely fantastic mind screws. Kingdom Hearts isn't the first game to feature masked mystery figures, but I do feel that it does a much better job of leaving players guessing than most other games.
Be careful, there are Claymore mines around there.
Who is this?
Stealth-equipped Claymore mines, invisible to the naked eye. Use the mine detector.
Identify yourself.
Just call me Deep Throat.
Yeah, a heavily modulated voice doesn't do you much good when you've got a discernible Russian accent. Even Kingdom Hearts 2 sidestepped this problem by having certain masked characters only speak through text. But the organization members themselves are also sympathetic in a way most Disney villains aren't, as they all share a common desire to return to their human forms, while also questioning whether the emotions they feel are genuine or just emulated from the memories of their original selves. Naturally, we need to talk about the ultimate, most heartbreaking example of this concept, Roxas. The first couple of hours of Kingdom Hearts 2 remains one of the series' biggest criticisms, with a dividing line that separates players who hated the lengthy tutorial sections and those who appreciated the unique narrative. While I do understand the complaints of the former, I also stand firmly by the latter side. Granted, it would have been nice if they just gave the option to skip the whole thing and repeat playthroughs, much like how Metal Gear Solid 2 lets you skip the entire tanker chapter, but from a narrative standpoint, it's easily the best writing in the entire franchise. The ultimate goal of Roxas is one that I feel would be borderline impossible not to feel some sympathy over, which is simply the right to keep on existing. A right that literally everyone who isn't a hologram or nobody says he can't even have. Watching Roxas go through the final stages of grief upon realizing that there's nothing he can do to stop his own eventual erasure is heartbreaking no matter how many times I see it. And the fact that Sora spends so much of the game completely unaware of who Roxas even was, or what happened to him, just adds to the tragedy in my opinion, because we know that Sora is a caring person by nature and would likely have empathized with Roxas's plight. That's why I have to disagree a bit with Clem's video on the matter, as he personally found the tonal shift between Roxas's sad resignation of his fate to the happy bouncing reunion of Sora and his friends to be rather jarring. The thing is, I feel that was purely intentional. And if you needed further proof of that, the scene afterwards when Sora is about to make his departure on the train, while unconsciously shedding a tear over the friends Roxas will never see again, perfectly spells out that this latest adventure, as wondrous and exciting as it may be, comes with some heavy caveats attached. Also, as a side note, Clem's makes some great videos, and he puts way more physical effort than I ever would, so please do check out his stuff if you haven't already. Speaking of caveats, the ending to Birth by Sleep doesn't just further exemplify that Sora's path was paved with the corpses of his predecessors beneath his feet. Hey, I made a Berserk reference! Go me! It also makes up one of the darkest and most depressing finales I've ever seen in a video game, or anywhere. While tragic prequels were already an established norm by the time Birth by Sleep came out, it was still heartbreaking to see all three of the major protagonists suffer a horrible fate. Whether it was Ventus having his very soul obliterated, Aqua having to spend 10 years trapped in a heartless infested limbo, or Terra being forced to watch as his former master uses his body to destroy several worlds. In retrospect, the Kingdom Hearts games tend to really cook up some truly horrible fates for its characters, oftentimes worse than death itself. Just look at poor Xion as she spends her last few seconds knowing that everyone she ever cared about won't even remember that she existed. Even the first Kingdom Hearts ended on a somewhat dour note, with Sora unable to reunite with Kairi in the end, and Riku sacrificing himself to keep the Heartless at bay alongside Mickey Mouse. Yeah, that's right. At the time, Square was only allowed to have Mickey appear once in the entire game, so they chose to have him literally trap himself inside a hellish pit filled with the darkest entities in the whole universe. Granted, it didn't take long for him and Riku to eventually bust out of there, but at the time of Kingdom Hearts 1, where there was no indication if and when the next sequel would appear, I still remember watching the ending with both of my sisters as they asked me with whimpered voices, "But what about Mickey?" While you may find most of the drama in the Kingdom Hearts games to be heavy-handed, and let's face it, much of it is, I still think it deserves more credit for touching on a lot of dark themes, no pun intended, that you normally wouldn't see in a Disney film, especially considering how sanitized most of the Disney brand was back in 2002. And if nothing else, you have to appreciate the creativity Nomura has put out towards a project that almost ended up as another soulless license game. Before Nomura came on board as director, the original test footage for Kingdom Hearts was allegedly so boring that a Square employee actually fell asleep during the screening. The game probably would have still turned out profitable without him, but it's also highly doubtful it would have had the legs of a long-running franchise without his creative involvement. Speaking of Nomura, the man who helped shape Final Fantasy VII has really gotten a lot of hate from the online community over the years, almost for as long as the hate towards the Kingdom Hearts series. I really do think it's both unfair and ignorant to blame Nomura for every short-sighted decision made with games that he's involved in. I mean, do you really think he has the kind of clout within the company to switch out an entire engine, thus delaying the already costly project for another couple of years? And logically speaking, if Nomura can't even get the sequel for The World Ends With You approved, I highly doubt he has the same level of creative freedom as, say, Hideo Kojima, plus I don't need to remind you how he was far from untouchable. The way I see it, Kingdom Hearts is one of the very rare chances where Nomura gets to put forth his his creative process into a project, so it's only natural he would try to fit in everything he possibly could. I'm not trying to deify him, I'm sure he carries his own share of the blame for when certain projects are held back, but as far as Kingdom Hearts is concerned,
Anyone who could take
Mickey Mouse
and turn it into that is, well, he's gotta be creative.
Oh, and having Mickey Mouse decked out in an organization hoodie? Yeah, that's awesome. I don't care what you say. I mean, look at him! He looks so cool! So if you made it this far to hear me gush about the series, then permit me to end things by talking about one more of my all-time favorite moments, which consequently might also be one of the most ridiculed. I am referring to the Goofy death scene. Once again, I am not joking. I honestly, unironically love this sequence, and feel personally saddened whenever anybody rags on it. First of all, of course they weren't trying to convince you that Goofy was actually dead. Heck, Goofy himself practically lampshades this once he does come back. When writing a story, be it a game or film or otherwise, you sometimes have to fall back on cliches. It's like that moment where the bad guy has the good guy dead to rights and takes a really long time to land the finishing blow while saying something corny like, "It's over." We know someone's going to come save the hero at the last second, and I'm sure that they know that we know. It's called dramatic effect for a reason, you know. But the real reason I love this scene so much is because of the raw emotions it gets out of these iconic Disney characters. Can you name me any other instance where Mickey swears vengeance for the death of his best friend? Or Donald being nearly brought to tears? I know that nobody enjoys these characters because of their emotional complexities, but as someone who's spent the better part of their life growing up with these characters while only being treated to one sole interpretation of them, I still appreciate any work that seeks to humanize them even by just a little bit. I imagine it's the same reason I've been seeing a lot of newfound appreciation for a Goofy movie, which also puts its titular talking dog through a more decidedly adult role as he struggles with fatherhood. It isn't sacrilege to want to connect with your beloved characters in more personal ways, and it's something that a lot of other franchises still refuse to acknowledge. Beyond that, I'll admit, I'm a softie, but I still love this moment to this day, and I'll continue to defend it, even if nobody else will. And that kind of summarizes why I love Kingdom Hearts so much. We can laugh about its increasingly complex storyline and overuse of buzzwords like light and darkness, but I also appreciate how it took what could have been a cynical cash grab crossover and decided to go in bold, often insane directions with some of the most recognizable faces in both video games and movies. Kingdom Hearts 3 is reported to be the end of the Xehanort saga, and from what I can gather, it will probably be the end of the journey for Sora and friends as well, even if the franchise will most likely continue afterwards. I am fully prepared to see the send-off of this 17-year epic, while feeling the same mix of joy, sadness, and bewilderment that I felt since the very beginning.
Okay, why not? I'll go with you guys.
Name's Goofy.
I'm Sora.
All for one, one for all.
You're giving me too many things lately. You're all I need. You smile.